Welcome to TippCast by the Nina Guardian. Well, hello and welcome to TippCast. It was a rough weekend for the Premier in all four codes with the hurlers, the footballers, the ladies football and the camogie team all losing. Joining me is Shane Brophy, Thomas Conway and Enda Treacy. Between us all, we've seen all the games with plenty of insight coming for you on the Nina Guardian's TippCast in the next hour. First of all, Shane, a rough all weekend of it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it was a rough paper to put together this week. Nothing but negatives and defeats all around. I think 6 in total if you throw in the intermediate camogie team they have a relegation final now next weekend, and the under-16 camogie team. But I always worry about under-16. I guess it's sort of developmental, so I don't like to sort of put too much focus on them. But yeah, it was rotten. Like I remember years with Tipp covering Tipp in all codes where you could have 3 or 4 on a weekend and they all win, and it's brilliant. But like this is, I can't remember the last time every one of the key, the major Tipp teams lost on the same weekend. It was very, very strange indeed, and it was a disappointing way for the league to end on a whole, which probably was, maybe apart from the ladies footballers, probably was relatively positive. But sure, look, if this is the bad weekend out of the way and we have better days during the summer, I think we'll take it.
Enda, did you get any sense that Tipperary weren't going all guns on the hurling side of things? Certainly in the football, getting relegated down to Division 4 despite being Munster champions is a bad look off it. But just to start off with the hurlers.
Yeah, I wouldn't say they weren't going out to win the match. By all accounts, they had even before Sheedy said it in the aftermatch, I think he said they had a hard training block. But apparently coming up to the match, they were training fairly hard. I think they'd done the same before the Cork game as well. Had a very hard training session and match before that. So with the 3-week break before the first round for Tipp, I think it was more of a thing of getting the bodies right, getting the fitness up. Whereas Watford, they have 2 weeks out and they're after a fair trimming against Galway. So I think they were targeting the match, especially in Walsh Park as well. They would have wanted to win that match, and they were easily the better team. To be honest, the scoreline kind of flattered Tipp. They could have shipped a double-digit beating there very easily. So hopefully it was just a bit of shadow boxing over a possible meeting in a Munster semi-final.
Yeah, certainly. And Thomas, from your point of view, you were at the ladies footballers, but you've seen them all over the weekend. What are your thoughts on that weekend? Is there any bright spots you've seen from the weekend?
The irony, I think, Shane, is that the game I was at, the ladies football match in Banagher. No, they lost to Westmeath and they were relegated, which was obviously hugely disappointing. But it was probably their best performance, from what I've seen from the games I've attended, because they were effectively annihilated in all their group games. But on Saturday, they actually put together a performance which, will probably inspire a lot of confidence in them. It kind of showcased the ability which we know they have. So, there were positives from that perspective, from a ladies football perspective. But in general, yeah, I think probably the standout result for me was the male footballers. I mean, it's, given the progress that was made last year and given the potential that we know is in that male football side, to be demoted back to Division 4 is, it's really galling. It's really hard to, it would be hard to process for them. So that probably stood out to me. I don't think the hurlers will be too concerned with the defeat to Waterford, even though Waterford looked impressive. But it would be interesting to see, how they're fixed in terms of the Munster Championship, because obviously it's going to be hotly contested.
Absolutely. And just a reminder that we're going out live on Twitter, YouTube and Facebook. If you want to get any comments in, if you want to get any questions in, we can throw them up on the screen and run through them with the lads. So just to start off with the Tipperary defeat to Watford down in Walsh Park, Shane, you were there at the weekend reporting on it, as can be read in the Guardian. 229 to 321, and Tipperary were in decent shape at half time, point ahead. Maybe just stealing that goal before half time kind of turned things around. But there was no suggestion at that stage that Tipperary were gonna get completely overrun in the second half. Like, I'm sure you have your own stats. I did mine, but I think it was something like, I'm just going to count them out here quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 chances in a row that Waterford had at the start of the second half. And there was 2 instances where they had a couple of shots at goal. And it just seemed for all the world that Tipperary were falling apart, or it looked like a team that had done some heavy training, or had if I'm to joke about it, even had a heavy night out the night before. And I'm nearly hoping that they did. What do you think happened?
Yeah, no, it's actually I was watching the game from Longford. Actually, I had a ride. Liam Hogan covered the game for the paper. His report is in the Guardian this morning. But no, there was this very, very strange as I was getting out of the car in Longford and plugging in the laptop, and you could hear the commentary team, Stephen Gleeson and Ken Hogan on the radio. They were just starting to panic, and I was like, God, maybe it's just a 5-minute spell that Tipp will come out of, and God, there was never any semblance. It was just wave after wave of Waterford attack. It was very, very strange that half times. I don't know. It's something that Waterford have tended to do under Liam Cahill. I think we remembered in the All Ireland semi final last year against Kilkenny, whatever they said at halftime, whatever magic dust Cahill and Beavens tend to, or the words they say, they really seem to get them to burst out from the traps. And it wasn't just a good 5 minutes. Well, it was an onslaught, and I think tactically there was a little shift there in the second half. You look at Tipp scored 2-13 in the first half. They only scored 1-8 in the second half. And there was a small bit of a breeze down there, but that can't explain that. And I definitely think there was a tactical shift from Waterford that I don't think they got an awful lot of credit. They more or less allowed Tipperary the ball, either puck it long, as we like to do, or puck it short to our cornerbacks and wing-backs and let them come up maybe to the 45, 65, where invariably they want to hit it long then anyway. Of course, Waterford decided, look, puck it in long, we'll have our men back, we'll turn you over, and then we'll hit you in waves going the other way. And look, I suppose if there was one, positive from the management side of view, they got to see, I suppose, that counter-attacking off-the-shoulder game at its very, very best. And they've got to go away for the next 3 weeks and try and work on how you try and negate it, because look, Waterford, I think I mentioned in my column there this week, all 4 other Munster teams play that style now. It's that off-the-shoulder possession game. Tipp are actually the last. I think they're the last of the major inter-county teams that are still playing the old tradition. They haven't converted in some way to the possession game. Kilkenny have to a certain degree, but Tipp are still tied to if the ball isn't around the 45 or 65 in the defence, the main option is to try and hit it in long into the full forward. And I just think, look, that's we've got to create a plan B for the championship. Whereas if plan A is in trouble, there's got to be a way of changing the way we use the ball supposed to draw out opposition defenders if they're start to sit back.
Yeah, I'm going to take up your point on that, Shane, and then I'll bring you in. And this idea of the running game and playing the ball around and running off the shoulder and all that kind of stuff. And I'll just bring up the team here so people can have a quick look at it in the Guardian article from the weekend. And if you look at the back line, the players who could run the ball out from the back, I think Cahill Barrett can definitely do it. I think Paddy Maher is probably going to just be holding the full back slot. I think Barry Heffernan is a very hard man to stop. He'd drag a few guys with him when he's coming out with the ball. Seamus Kennedy's got lots of pace. And I think Brendan and Ronan can certainly do it too. Paddy Cadell has shown good bursts too. And then the half forward line, I think Dan McCormick has shown that he can go past lads and certainly win frees. And Michael Breen has that power in his legs too. So I think it is there in maybe not all of those players, and maybe not to the same level as how Waterford do it with the likes of Calum Lyons and Austin Gleeson and Darragh Lyons.
But I think from a Tipp point of view, it's more off the cuff rather than structured. There's no if Dan goes off in a solo run or Brendan or Seamus Kennedy, it's sort of I'll pass it off to whoever is in my vicinity rather than maybe knowing there's somebody going to be coming off the shoulder. It's sort of it's sort of off the cuff, really. Like so.
Yeah, well, so I kind of what I was talking about initially is these are the players who could do it. So I think a lot of the Tipp players can do it, but it's something that's very difficult to just coach in overnight. I've even seen it. I mean, club hurling is changing, and you all know this too. That's starting to come in at club level, and it's something that I've done in training a little bit recently with the club, and it can be, certainly as an older player, it's something that's kind of a little bit unusual to kind of get your head around and to naturally start to do. So I think Tipperary certainly can do it. There's too much long ball. Like the opposition can just sit back, hoover it up. And when they do that and you start getting dragged up the field, then when they run the ball out and pin a lovely ball in for Desi Hutchinson, I mean, I'm not sure what Cathal Barrett can do up there. Enda, what were your thoughts on it?
Yeah. I was saying it last week on the episode, and I was a bit worried about the full back line with the pace that Waterford had in it. To be honest with you, they're savagely fit. Even up to the last couple of minutes there, Shane Bennett made a run and turned Cathal Barrett inside out and nearly nicked another goal only for a Brian Hogan save. But the game plan's all well and good, but I think Tipp were savagely tired there in that match in particular. Like when you see Dan McCormack coming off after less than 50 minutes and he's literally dragging himself off the field, he's one of the fittest men I've ever seen play hurling for Tipp. You know, there was heavy training done. But in terms of the game plan, yeah, I'd agree with Shane that most of the other counties are doing it now. Whether it benefits them or not, I don't know. Is it more of a trying to copy Limerick thing and match them? I think Tipp, it's worked for Tipp in the past, especially that group of players. It's hard to coach in, especially with the short turnaround we've had with COVID and whatnot. It seems to be a skill that's gone in the game, really, just hitting the ball down on top of forwards and having a man catch a high ball. For Tipp, we've never had that. So the other day, it was like there was a brick wall up at the Waterford half back line, and that put savage pressure on the backs. The ball just kept coming back to midfield, and Waterford just pegged through the middle unattended. It was worrying enough, but I wouldn't take too much stock in it if they were tired. And Waterford looked incredibly fit.
Yeah, well, it's one thing being tired. It's another thing wondering, are they keeping their cards close to their chest? Are they intentionally just driving the ball along? But like Ronan Maher got 3 points from more or less his own half or around the midfield area and another one from a free. But, you know, as much as he can definitely shoot from distance and other players can do that too, I'd love to see good ball being played in front of the likes of Jason Ford. You know, he scored that goal. Like Noel McGrath, when did he ever get a ball played short to him? Michael Breen got a point after 10 seconds, but didn't really get in the game otherwise. So I'm just wondering, Thomas, what do you think? Is this a case that Tipperary just didn't show their hand whatsoever and we'll see a very different use of the ball in the championship?
I'm hopeful that was the case, because I can't really fathom it. You know, the tactical dynamic. When you think of this Tipp team, or this group of players, and when they really thrive is under that kind of Eamon O'Shea regime, a kind of dynamic movement, players moving off the shoulder, jinking hand passes out, and you know exactly the type of tactical play and strategy that you know we've been talking about, which they've been lacking kind of throughout the league. So I do wonder, was there an element of kind of withholding or holding their cards close to their chest, as you said, and I'm hopeful that's the case, because I really think it's that is how this Tipp team will thrive, is to play that type of game. I can't look, I mean, like, you have to be versatile. Versatility is key, and long ball can often produce rewards when used in the right place. But I do wonder were Tipp kind of withholding it and in preparation for championship, because I just think they have the set of forwards, they have the pace there to play that kind of dynamic running game. So I'm hopeful that they'll bring it to the table once the Munster Championship arrives.
Yeah,
Shane, I just wondered, like, I just put it to you, like, I look at the team that was played the last day. I think we all thought our 6 best backs were out on the field, and you'll probably look the odd man out. Probably at the moment is Brian McGrath. You think he's very, very close. Like, he's probably unlucky that you probably wouldn't class him in the top 6. Is there maybe a chance that maybe the management will go away and think, okay, we actually can play all 7. Do we go? I know the word sweeper is a dirty word in Tipperary. Like, I know it is nearly banned.
How dare you bring it up?
Yeah, but is there anything to say, like, the way that match changed in the second half? Like, there was quality ball going into Desi Hutchinson and the Bennetts, but like, if we did have a sweeper or a Brendan Maher back there who had no marking responsibility, just sitting back and cutting off the avenue, and maybe we have to sacrifice one forward to get an extra man back. Like, it was like Tipp did score 321. That would still win an awful lot of matches. Like, so, like, we're probably still going to score an awful lot in games. Like, do we maybe have to have an extra body at the back to maybe just keep that area maybe tight as possible, and maybe give the forwards a chance at the other? I think it's an interesting one that maybe is worth considering. That, like, do we have to go with 6 forwards? Like, does this Tipp team actually need an extra defender at this stage?
Well, like, it's a fair question, and it's something that like you talked about putting up 321, and that's fair enough. But like, it's how many chances are Tipperary creating in this game compared with Waterford? Waterford created 52 chances, and Tipp created 38. And I'm just going to go back to the previous game and see what Tipperary created, and it was 51 chances to Westmeath's 26. Now, you would expect to put up that many chances against Westmeath. They're not really at the races at the top level at the moment. But I think it should be a hybrid thing. I mean, if you look at the way Tipp picked their team, Dan McCormick is picked at wing forward, but a lot of the time we see him out at midfield, and often he swaps with whoever the midfielder is and just kind of plays their orthodox. But my problem is, when you start blasting the ball forward a lot, which we did see in this game, and if we're to take this at face value that this is how Tipperary might play in the championship, they may not. But if we're to go on the basis of this performance, if you blast that ball long, you tend to get sucked up the field as the other team runs the ball out, because at some stage you have to go and engage them around the middle, because they'll just be able to pop it over from distance. So as a half backline, as you get drawn out the field, people burst through. They can either score or they can feed the ball in front of 50 yards of space for Desi Hutchinson, Shane Bennett, and so on. And I don't care who you are as a full backline, eventually the dam will open, which is why I have no issue with 2-2 being scored on Cathal Barrett. I don't blame him at all. So I just think it's if Tipperary can actually mix up their play, if they can play the ball around, I don't mind if you have 5 forwards, but someone who can transition between going into midfield so that someone can sit in front of Seamus Kennedy and he can drop back. But it is about working that ball out. So I think it's a hybrid thing. Would you tend to agree with that, Shane? Like, I mean, I don't like the idea of necessarily bringing in an extra back. I just think be smarter, use the ball well, stop shooting from 100 yards. Instead, make your aim to get the ball into Jake Morris's hand and James Callanan's hand, because they're better than, there's a reason they're in the inside line and you're out in the half back line.
Yeah, like it definitely. And look, maybe as Enda said, look, maybe they had a hard week's training, and maybe mentally, like when you're maybe mentally just not at it because of fatigue, like you tend to make the wrong decision, and the easiest option would be to drive it in long instead of maybe taking that extra split second, maybe to survey, maybe is there a hand pass on, or is there somebody maybe in around midfield who's free, like so. Like look, I have no doubt about it that I personally, I didn't see I thought it was a win-win. A Tipp couldn't lose last weekend, even if they went down with a very strong team and they ended up losing, and which they did, and some issues were exposed. At least we're exposed now rather than 3 weeks' time. Like, I think they can go away and fix it. And I suppose I can now bring up my stat from yesterday, which got a lot of credit. Tipp haven't won their last league game in 11 seasons, or sorry, 11, and you throw in 2011 they drew with Wexford, and like that was a very, very low ebb Wexford team at that stage. Like, and like since then Tipp have won 3 All-Irelands and 6 Munster titles. So it just shows you that they're very adept at, I suppose, bouncing back from league struggles coming into the championship. So I suppose 2017 and the Galway defeat was probably the one where they didn't really recover from it. That one stung, but I don't think this one will sting too much. I definitely think the management will have said, okay, we definitely have an issue here that needs to be rectified, because look, it's going to pop up in the summer if it's not dealt with now. And I give the brains trust the benefit of the doubt that they'll have a plan A and a plan B for the summer if it's needed.
Enda, you can take up that point, but I'd also love to ask you there what you make of the younger players who've come through. I think Craig Morgan and Owen Connolly came into a fairly difficult situation in that game. I think it was very difficult for them to impose themselves. But the young players overall, I mean, Paddy Cadell has gotten his chance. Robert Byrne obviously getting the red card the last day won't help out his chances. But what do you make of some of the younger guns? Even Mark Keogh came in again the last day and probably did a little bit better this time.
Yeah, well, Paddy Cadell and Brian McGrath, I think, are the two shining lights from the newer players that are coming in. Brian he's got McGrath heading him. He's really calm on the ball. No panic. He looks like he's settled as an intercounty senior already, and even though it's really his first year, getting a good run at it. Paddy Cadell, I think I'd be starting in midfield for the championship. He's a really class player. He's just a link-up man there midfield, and he works hard, and he's well able to take a score as well. It was unfortunate Brian O'Meara was looking good there early in the Limerick game, and he got an unfortunate injury. I think he would have been knocking on the door if he had to stay going. And Craig Morgan was unlucky at the start of the year. He just wasn't fit starting out. But he came on the other day and he's mobile and he's young yet. But he'll make a contribution, I think. But you're still going to be relying on the older heads. Especially, I actually forgot to bring it up. I don't know what the heat was like down in Waterford, but I was in Kilkenny. And it was absolutely baking as well. So that probably contributed a lot to the performance as well. But at the end of the day, it's only the league, and it's probably the least important league we've had in living memory without a league final to play for. So with championship in mind, that's the be all and end all. Hopefully they turn it around. But in terms of game plans, as you were saying, is there going to be that much of a change in game plan, having not played any different style during the whole league, and then you're facing into a Munster semi-final in a few weeks? I don't think so. It'll just be about getting energy levels right, getting lads back at 100%. And in Tipp, we have the forwards to pull it out of the bag. They weren't moving too well the other day, so I wouldn't be too concerned.
Yeah, and Thomas, just a final point on this. Are you positive overall heading into the championship now? Or, that was on a baking hot day, as Enda mentioned there, and it's not going to get any cooler heading into these games now in the height of summer. You'd imagine that the weather is going to hold firm. Any questions over whether Tipperary have the legs in the team are certainly going to be tested out.
Well, yeah, you're right there. I mean, the temperature is only going to increase, if anything, or certainly we're hopeful of that. But I think we alluded to this the last day. The intercounty game is no longer it's no longer a question of 15 players in a team. You're looking at, the substitutes and who you can introduce, because realistically, you will need the impact from the bench, and the impact from the bench will have to be significant in order to win games. So all those younger lads whom Enda referenced there, I mean, I would envisage them all playing a role to some extent once the championship arrives, because they'll be needed. And when I think of them, I think of I think of their athleticism and that, and their physicality, their skill level. And that's where I think they fit into that kind of that running game. I'm even thinking of lads like Jake Morris, who's inside in the in the full forward line. I mean, he has an ability. He's a sublimely skillful hurler. I mean, he has that ability to rove around and play in almost. He kind of reminds me of, I don't know, does he remind me of Cian Lynch in some respects, in that he's really quick with the wrists and clever. And I think if we can give our forwards kind of more liberty, freedom to roam a little bit and play off each other, I think it could be really, really beneficial to Tipp. Because I just get the sense that at the moment, because of the kind of game plan we've adopted, because of the direct ball, we're not utilising to the same extent. Now, whether that has to be rectified in the half-back line, that's probably debatable as well. But I just think that Tipp, have such a stellar set of forwards that we need to maximise them. And at the moment, I just don't feel we're doing that.
Yeah, Shane, I've often said it that Tipperary have Barcelona forwards, and too often play a little bit like Stoke City. I'm looking at the stats from the second half, and Tipperary just didn't create a chance from open play until the 44th minute. So just one in the first 15 minutes of the second half shot taken from open play. And I just wonder, like a lot of the commentary I've heard is, Tipp will need to up the energy levels for the championship and, be able to get after teams and give them a chase around the field. But like, is that a sustainable game plan to be able to go to the well every single day? I mean, because ultimately, like, what happens the day where you're a little bit sluggish?
Yeah.
You need that game plan to rely on too. I mean, Limerick look at their ease a lot of the time because they use the ball so well, and they have the other team chasing around the field because they're working around the 65 off each other's shoulder, lovely interplay, hand passing, then pin a beautiful ball in for the likes of Aaron Gallan. And I don't know if Tipp can change midstream to do something like that, but I do know that it's a risky thing if you're just hoping that the energy gets up and one big last hurrah for every championship game. I think that's tough going.
There's no doubt it is, but like I think the management, I think they know how they can get the guys right for the 4th of July against Clare Waterford. Like, you think Tipp will have a small bit of advantage there. Like, Clare Waterford could be coming off a game 7 days previous, and if you're talking about that game now, I think that's a toss-up game for me. I wouldn't put it past extra time be needed in that match in Thurles. You could potentially, those two teams could have picked up a few injuries as well. So look, I definitely think for Tipp to win the All-Ireland this year, I think they have to go through the front door. I don't think any of the experienced guys need to be playing extra matches through the back door. Like, I just think that the shorter route, maybe hopefully a game every 2 weeks where they can just keep pressing along. And look, we saw in 2019, Sheedy's first year, we had a very, very poor exit to the league against Dublin in Semple Stadium. And 6 weeks later in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, the team were absolutely hopping when the ball was thrown in against Cork. Like, they were really, really moving. So, look, you'd like to think that for whoever they play on the 4th of July in Limerick or in Cork, that will be ready. And I suppose just to wrap up the segment, I suppose I was just thinking maybe long term. I know maybe even longer term, looking ahead to next year, if Liam Sheedy is not there and there's a new manager comes in and he has to try players, or if Sheedy's there and he goes to try something else, falling from first place to third, and if the GA goes by how they're going to redraw the groups for next year, Tipp are probably going to fall into the easier side of the league for next year. Like, you have Kilkenny, Waterford, but then you have Dublin, Offaly and Antrim. It's like that, probably, whether Sheedy's there or there's somebody else there, that probably allows you for a bit more experimentation next year, where you're not, like, you look at the other section, you'll have Galway, Wexford, Clare, Cork and Limerick. Like you have to be on it every day against those teams. So look, I don't think long term, maybe if that will probably help us as well, in terms of if we have to, I suppose, maybe try develop a new script next year. And look, I know from my own point of view as a reporter, having Kilkenny in the group, having maybe a trip to Antrim. I've never been to Belfast. I'm sure then the noisy neighbours from Offaly, we could be going into Burr again. So look, it's I even think next year's league could be a lot more attractive in a lot of ways for a lot of Tipperary supporters. And sure, we might call into Dublin for a cup of tea too, to you, Shane.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be glad to host you. But actually, a question one more question for you, Shane, on the hurling before we move on to the football. What are your thoughts on some of the opposition that might come down the tracks? I mean, Limerick are starting to all of a sudden motor very heavily. The win over Westmeath, everyone would have expected that, and they pulled away towards the end. But they were brilliant the week before. Galway looked very good, came back strongly against Cork, who collapsed in their second half. Also, then Clare, who most people are expecting Waterford to beat them, and also obviously the Liam Cahill's win against Tipperary at the weekend might back that up. But Clare beat Kilkenny. Kilkenny probably, after some wins over, it was the weaker side of the league draw. Are they all of a sudden looking quite vulnerable and looking like maybe they've a few ordinary players on the field? I suppose most teams do. But what are your thoughts on some of the opposition out there at the moment that Tipp may face?
If you go through from what we've seen in the league, I definitely think Limerick and Galway are 1 and 1A. I think they've definitely separated themselves from the rest of the pack. I still think Tipperary are third, but I definitely think Waterford are there. And I mentioned that Waterford-Clare game is a toss-up match. And Clare finished with a flourish in the league. But if you go back overall, Clare's league has actually been pretty good. That 1 point loss to Antrim in the first round is actually not as bad as it looked initially, considering what Antrim have done. Clare for 55 minutes against Wexford were way better than Wexford. They conceded, they had a red card, and Wexford just got a run in them and won the game for narrowly at the end. But like Clare could very, very easily finish that 1B top of the table and potentially be in another league final. So I think Brian Lohan would be very happy. I suppose it's the injuries again, and I suppose it's that utter. I think the worry for Clare is their utter reliance or the over reliance on Tony Kelly. Like, what was it, 2-6 or 2-7 the last day? Like, who is the other forward that's going to step up if Tony Kelly is kept quiet? That's my only worry with them. Like, Shane O'Donnell can do it, but it's one every 3 or 4 days. Aaron Shanahan's the potential to do it. It's one every 3 or 4 days when he can score maybe 1 or 4 or 1-5. So that's my issue with them. I think Dublin probably have had the most disappointing league. I think Cork have been found out. I thought maybe after 3 rounds they were going to be something, but look, I thought the way they went, they were 6 points up against Galway and lost by 6.
You're setting us up for a big fall there, Shane, by saying Cork have been found out.
I think they have. I think Limerick and Galway have shown how you take them apart. I just think that short puck out and that. It just leads to too many issues. So I just don't see them beating Limerick, and I just think Limerick will beat them 9 or 10 points in that Munster semi-final. I just don't see how they're going to be able to get that plan A to work. They don't seem to have a plan B. And
we'll bring in the 2 lads on this because it's an interesting one. Enda, if you can go first, and then Thomas, you can just go on the back of him. Yeah,
with Cork, I think it was indicative of the way they're going to play that they didn't change tact in that league match against Limerick. If they don't get it out in the first few possessions from the back line, they're in big trouble. And I don't think they have the physicality to do it, especially against Limerick or Galway. And their backs are just way too lax. I can't see them making an impact, as Shane was saying. They've still had 3 or 4 of the same backs that haven't been cutting it for the last few years. And it's always been their downfall. In terms of Clare, they're really missing John Conlon's presence up in the forwards. I know he went okay there centre back the last day, but he was pretty much on his own for most of the game as a free man. I think they're robbing Peter to pay Paul there, and if Kelly isn't scoring, as Shane was saying, although the other day he scored. I think he just scored a goal and he scored 1-6 from a penalty and freeze. So he wasn't over relied on in that game. Aidan McCarthy and Shanahan played fairly well. But I think they're lacking in firepower as well in their backs. I think they're going to need to play a sweeper against Waterford because we've seen what they can do to a good set of backs if they're on it. And Clare, 6 for 6, they haven't got a set of backs that Tipp have. In terms of winners, look, it's hard to look past Limerick and Galway are shaping up really nice. They have a savage panel to choose from now. They have some really good experienced subs coming on. The Coonies and Niall Burke not been able to start. Evan Nyland's come in there and he's really impressive. We're all at the same time. Tipp aren't far from them. If Tipp can bring their best any day they go out, they can beat any of those teams. There's no question about that. So it's just about getting it out in the day.
Yeah, Thomas.
Yeah, I wouldn't be so quick to write off Clare. Even if there is a fragility in their backline. I was just watching them. I was watching the highlights of the Sunday game yesterday and looking at Clare, and that ability to run at teams. I can just imagine a situation where if Clare managed to beat Waterford, which as we've said is they have every possibility of doing, playing Tipp and running at our full backline. You can imagine a situation where Tony Kelly hits gear and some of the other lads, he brings some of the other lads with them, and that pace, that scintillating pace when they run at. When they're allowed to run at teams. But as we've said, that doesn't always work. And teams will obviously, be focusing on Kelly and reining him in. So there's no guarantee that he'll hit gear in every game. I think what separates Limerick from the rest of the pack, even Galway, is that they play the percentages so well. I mean, their decision-making on the ball, we talk about their lovely, their seamless interplay and the hand passes and Cian Lynch and his flicks and everything like that. But if you look at it, they're really adept at at decision making, and they can also go direct when the appropriate time arrives. And I think that's one of the elements of their game, along with their physicality. And they've improved their discipline. Garrod Hegarty, said at the weekend, that they were forced to do that, and they have in recent games. So I think that's kind of what sets Limerick apart, is their versatility and their capability with the ball to mix it and play different styles. And they look increasingly hard to beat from what I can see.
What about you, Shane? And just in terms of your take of has anything changed from this year's league, or from before the league, has changed your opinion on anyone?
Just the way that for a good while we were probably hoping that this is a sign that that Limerick might be taking a small step back this year, because they hadn't won their first 3 games. They didn't look overly impressive, and then boom, they play against Cork, and all of a sudden you're thinking, right, Limerick are back on top again. I think Tipperary do have the hurlers to more or less beat anybody. Let's not forget that last year Tipperary were in a great spot to beat Galway in that backdoor match, until the very harsh red card to Cathal Barrett later on. But I wonder, have Galway taken that extra step in year 2 under Shane O'Neill? And as Enda mentioned, there are the likes of Evan Nyland coming in, even Fintan Burke laying down a marker at wing back in season 2 for him. He's really good. Darren Morrissey, Cathal Mannion looks like he's kicking on to another level. They did what they did to Cork despite Joe Canning, who's hit top form, not being available for the game. So I wonder, and again, we don't know exactly if what we saw from Tipp at the weekend is what we will see in the championship, but it feels like Galway have kicked on just a little bit ahead of Tipperary right now, with Limerick certainly as number 1. But I think after that, Tipperary are there. I still think Cork can beat anybody. I know what you're saying about maybe they've been found out, but I think they'll only continue to develop that style of bringing the ball out from the back. It didn't happen in year 1 for Limerick. It might happen for them and click as time goes on. I think they could potentially beat anybody, but I don't think they can actually win 4 games to go through the front door and win an All-Ireland.
I think Cork are a team that, if they're going to do anything this year, to be through the back door, they'll get momentum. If they get if they lose, but if they start winning games, as you say, and get used to that style, they'll be very, very hard. As we see with any Cork team, when they're I would say confident and cocky, they're very, very hard to beat.
And mightn't that be the thing too, that Cork maybe, they'll come out and there'll be no more talk of shadow boxing when they play Limerick. They'll go out and they'll find out if, right, our full strength team, can they play the ball out from the back against the unbelievable press that Limerick are going to put on them? And if it doesn't work out, they'll probably learn a lot about themselves, about their real full team, and then they might be able to adjust it in the back door. But I don't know. I think they can beat anyone, but not win the All-Ireland. Outside of that, Waterford, I think, would push pretty close as well, because Liam Cahill it's looking very, very impressive his first year and a bit, especially through 2 COVID seasons where he's had interrupted preparation. They're looking quite good. I think Tipperary, Waterford, Cork can be right there behind. Maybe Kilkenny just a step back from that again, and then Galway number 2 with Limerick still. Yeah, I think it'll be Limerick just ahead. I don't know if you have any final thoughts on that before we move on to the football. Yeah, look, we'll move on to the football because we've talked plenty about the hurling. It was a disappointing day up in Pearse Park in Longford. You were there, Shane. 113 to 9 points. It's going to be Division 4 football next year. When you're coming in as Leinster, or Munster champions, I should say, obviously, that is very, very disappointing, Shane, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's sort of, I suppose the disappointing aspect, was just the way it petered out on Sunday. There was no fight, there was no spirit. It was a long time since I've seen that. Actually, it was something Martin Quinlivan from Clonmel mentioned on local radio on Monday, and it's actually something I had thought about earlier in the day, and I mentioned in my analysis pieces. It reminds me of how the John Evans era finished up, in 2012 when they were relegated from Division 3. Just the performances were so poor. I remember, I think they lost to Wexford and they lost to Sligo in some games, and there was just nothing, and there was nothing last weekend. And I'm not having a go at the players themselves. Physically, they looked wrecked, they looked tired. There was no energy, there was no verve, no guys coming off the shoulder. There was just lacked everything of what we saw in the Munster final last year, where there was options, there was guys running into space, guys running off the shoulder. Everybody looked in sync about what they were doing, and look, it's just so disappointing the way it's fallen. I suppose falling apart in the last 6 months, and I don't know whether there's anything in it, and maybe I suppose it's maybe something we have to ask somebody in Cavan too, because they suffered the same fate. Is that, like, for all Tipperary and Cavan achieved last November, I just wonder psychologically the fact that they didn't get to properly celebrate and properly, I would just say, enjoy or maybe understand what they achieved. Is it still hanging over their heads in some ways? Not a sort of a make weight, but they haven't got the full benefits of what they did. Like, ideally, in a normal year, Tipp win a Munster championship, and the cup, you have great nights out, and lads have a great session, and they get their medals, and they're bonding, and they go to the schools, and they feel brilliant meeting the kids. And Tipp haven't got all of that, and I just wonder have both Tipp and Cavan missed the benefits of that, where, you know as well as I do, if you win something at any level, you feel 10 foot tall for a while when you get the acknowledgement of the people. And like there was a great acknowledgement from the people of Tipperary after they won the Munster Championship last year, but I suppose they didn't get to meet them in publicly and say, God, you were great, and will you sign my ball, or can I get your autograph? They never got that. And you as well as when you're happy in yourself and you're confident and you say, God, this is what we did, and you actually go into next year's league feeling 10 foot tall. And I think a Tipperary team maybe fully able to acknowledge what they did last year would have walked through the 3 teams, but they never did. They never got a chance to do that. And look, on performances alone, they're deservedly in Division 4 next year. I think performances in the 4 games, they were not good. They found themselves in Division 4. And look, we have to say, but for COVID last year, the first lockdown, they were probably heading that way anyway. Probably COVID last year came at the right time. They were able to go away. They came back for the last 2 games against Offaly and Leitrim. They won them to stay up, and it kick-started everything. And just, it sort of regressed back to that again, where the performances were poor, and the trapdoor got them this time.
But is that not a little bit of a watery excuse, Shane? I mean, they were brilliant last year and brought Tipperary people on a brilliant journey. But to say that they didn't get their heads patted, that therefore that they mightn't have been able to kick on again this year. I mean, this was a fairly average group. Offaly, Wicklow, Longford. There's one other team in there as well. Offaly, Longford. You remember off the top of your head. But anyway, like, to score just 4 points from play in this game. I mean, Sean O'Connor got a free. Conor Sweeney got 4 frees. It was a very, very limp performance. I know there was injuries throughout the league. There wasn't, Michael Quinlivan wasn't there for the whole lot of it. Maybe he could be sharper. Colin O'Riordan obviously isn't there. Liam Casey, other lads injured. Robbie Kiley out for the year. But is that not just giving them a little bit too much of a kind of a let-off? Is it possible that the players realise, based on how Kerry are going to bounce back again this year, and maybe Cork will keep kicking on, that, do you know what? We've kind of done it. It's never going to get better than that. And maybe some of them took the foot off the pedal a small bit, Shane.
Oh, quite possibly. Like, there's no. I did think that if the initial plan this year was for the league to start in February, and I definitely think the delay of the league going back to May definitely hurt Tipp. So you can take, even the way the Mayo game finished up last year, if you just had a short downtime and you were going straight into league in January, February, that momentum from last year would have continued. They had the training in their legs. They were going to be ready to go again. But I suppose the longer it went on, look, maybe, like we did hear from David Power and Conor Sweeney, the guys were hitting all their targets in their individual sessions. Look, maybe some guys took their eye off the ball. Like, definitely physically we looked heavy-legged. I can't say we didn't look fit, but compared to other teams, like, we lacked energy. Like, I just wonder why that is. Like, you think, like, it's just hard to put your finger at. Like, it's easy to point to the injuries, and definitely they had a major part to play. Like, when you're out your starting half back line from last year, like Kevin Fahey, only of the 3 guys, like Kevin Fahey was, last Sunday was the first time we had one of the 3, Robbie, Kevin and Bill Maher, starting in the league. And Kevin did as much as he could, but like, it's not enough. Like, and it's hard to put it on the new guys like Pádraig Luarim there and Emmett Maloney and like Paddy Feehan, I thought was probably the only guy last Sunday who really brought that bit of energy to the game and in the middle of the field. And look, we've seen it with Paddy when he was with Tipp underage hurling and senior hurling. Like he's an up and down the field sort of player. He what you see is what you get. But I suppose the lack of leadership there too, like was disappointing. Like I suppose when you're losing the likes of Colin O'Riordan from last year and Robbie Kiley was a great leader in defence, and I suppose Brian Fox looked as maybe a small bit. It looked like a 32, 33-year-old player there last weekend as well. Even though when he came on at the start of the second half, his presence alone sort of helped kickstart, and I probably had that 10-minute period where Tipp got back to 8 all and were looking like they were going to maybe do something. But like, I suppose the disappointing thing was like after the goal went in, like, it was only 1-8 to 8 points at that stage. There were still about 20 minutes to go. There was loads of time, but you just knew at that stage Tipper had beaten Dockett that they just didn't have the belief or the wherewithal maybe to just find that little bit more in the last 20 minutes to conjure up the result. Like compared to Longford, like their players were up for it. Like the terrace or the stand in Pearse Park, like their supporters, their backrooms, the stats guy who was sitting beside me, he was kicking every ball. Like, and compared to everyone from Tipp, it was just so flat on the day, which was the disappointing aspect.
Yeah, and what did you make of it? Longford do have some good players. I mean, obviously, I doubt too many Tipperary players will be looking into their panel that much. I'd have a bit of an insight because I lived with one of their panelists up till last year. So Paddy Cullum is a very good goalie. Paddy Fox at full back, he's won a Leinster title with Mullinachta. Mickey Quinn has obviously played in the AFL. Daniel Minn is a brilliant player. Darren Gallagher, great leadership. Like even Robbie Smith is one of these kind of guys with a wand of a left foot as well. They do have good players in their ranks, but surely we can expect a little bit more from Tipperary at this stage, Enda, or is that being unfair and not taking into account some of the circumstances that Shane outlined? I
don't think it is unfair. Look, there's injuries happen, and look, it's unlucky that the players that got injured. They're key for us. We just don't have the players coming out. I don't know what Shane thinks, but once we're missing our 3 or 4 of our starting 15, the players coming in, they're a serious drop in ability down to those players, and further again as you go down the panel. And I think the underage for the last few years is really starting to tell with Tipp. Just been really, really poor results. I think it's been going downhill since we got to the All-Ireland in 15 in the minor, or this under 21 in 2016. There hasn't been the players coming through, and it's been pretty much a fairly stable team with the odd exception coming in. But when we're down to our bare bones, we don't have the standard of player to come in and pick up the slack. And I think it shows in the league. There was really no improvement game to game. If anything, that second half performance from Tipp there last day against Longford was really, really poor. I think Pádraig Luarim scored the equalising point to make it 8 all in the 48th minute, and I don't think we scored until 5 minutes before the end, and it was a free. Like there was literally no energy in the team, no go, nobody taking the game by the scruff of the neck. Running at Longford, it was always a lateral pass, taking the simple option, nobody taking a chance. And we can really have no complaints that we're down Division 4. We were really, really soundly beaten the other day, and we've been poor in all the games this year.
Thomas, final word to you. So heading into the Munster Championship, where I think Kerry are going to be favoured to beat Clare and set up a Munster semi-final against Tipperary. Are there any crumbs of comfort we can look towards ahead of that clash with the Kingdom?
To put it simply, and this will sound harsh, no, I can't see Tipp pulling off any sort of major upset this year. Like, I mean, I think of last year, and while look, I'm not questioning it was a momentous achievement and such an emotional day last November when they beat Cork, and with the 100th anniversary of Bloody Sunday and all that, the stars aligned for them. But like, if you look at that, prior to that, they had just about scraped past Limerick, thanks to that magical Conor Sweeney free. They were annihilated by Mayo subsequently in the semi-final, completely off the pace there. So there comes a point that you have to start asking questions about this Tipp team, because we look, and I mean, it was O'Riordan's impact was huge in that Munster final. You know, he gave a towering display at midfield, and a lot of the play revolved around him. So, like, they have undoubted talent. I'm not questioning that, and their work ethic, their honesty. I don't think. To be honest, I don't really think it's a question of them not investing kind of the effort and dedication. I wouldn't question that. But just their ability to deliver on that big day. I mean, they did it at underage level. I'm just wondering, they have to stand up now. We need to see consistency in their performances, and that means I think it will require or necessitate a certain kind of change in the way they play football. I mean, they tend to recycle the ball a lot, an awful lot. Like many other teams, but not necessarily make the inroads into the forward line. And we know they have, the forwards who can kick points. I think there's going to have to be something radical done. It was very disappointing. But unfortunately, go on, Shane.
Yeah, I just want to come back in.
Yeah, sorry.
I think that the consequences of going to Division 4 could be serious. Because you mentioned Colin O'Riordan there. Colin's in his last year of his current contract with Sydney. If Colin was thinking of coming home, is he going to come back to a Division 4 team? You'd probably think that's probably hurt us a bit. The world is probably going to be a little bit more open next year. Will the guys that maybe in their mid-20s, or maybe the Michael Quinn-Evans who only got part of the way around the world maybe last year before things locked down, will some of them decide maybe now is the time? Because look, Division 4 is not going to set the world alight. When, take no disrespect, like you have matches against Carlow and Waterford and Sligo and Leitrim. It's not, even compared to Division 3, where you have the likes of Offaly, and you might have to go up to the north to play the Derrys and the Cavans. I suppose the Cavan game probably is the one that would stick out for next year. Long term, my fear all along was that Tipp were probably going to end up being like what Wexford were in the noughties, that you just get a great group of players that will just do something for a good few years, and that after a certain length of time it regress back to the mean. And I hope I'm wrong, but I just have that element, the feeling that it is. You talk the short term, the 4 weeks up to the Munster semi-final against Kerry or Clare. You just look to see if the players could just group together and say, "Look, lads, we're defending Munster champions. Are we just going to get trampled over by Clare or Kerry, or are we just going to show a bit of backbone and just come out swinging that day and show that last year? Look, there was something in us. Just don't let it peter out. Just don't have your first defence of a Munster title in 85 years, and seeing potentially maybe Kerry coming to Thurles and embarrassing us. There's got to be a bit of this. Conor Sweeney, the older guys have got to step up now for next 4. Don't leave it to David Power or Paddy Christie or Declan Brown. It's got to come from the players here now, and they've got to decide, look, we've got to dig in. And I suppose one disappointing aspect, it doesn't help the situation, is losing Alan Campbell, who's had to depart the panel this week for work commitments. He's moving to the United States in the next few weeks. He would have been a big help in that dressing room for the next month, because he's been there for the guts of 10 years. He knows what it's about, and he'd be a good, sensible head in there. And he's not going to be there either. It just feels that there's always a setback there, but nothing seems to be maybe just going to fall into place to maybe just help this thing out.
Shane, is that the reality though of playing a code where you're not the stronger code in the county? Tipperary will always be primarily a hurling panel. There's probably several lads on the hurling panel that David Power would love to poach rather than the other way around. Like you've mentioned, Alan Campbell not being there. John Maher, of course, was taken by the hurlers last year as well. So is that not just kind of life? And it's always going to be tough for Tipperary to sustain a challenge over a couple of years, much like you're talking about with Wexford, because you're kind of on the hind tits. That's tough for David Power.
That's it. And it's something actually David Power mentioned after the game, and that there could be something in it that while the standard of club football in Tipp probably has improved a nice bit over the last few years, it's still, compared to all the other major footballing counties, I suppose our club championship probably isn't the strongest overall. You'd probably look at Mile Rovers, Commercials, Lockmore, and Bracken's probably the big 4, Kilsheen and 5. After that, there's probably a drop there. And David Power mentioned that when Tipperary, a county, don't have a strong club championship, having a strong pre-season, maybe McGrath Cup type of thing, where they can get all the best guys they want and get them into a high-end setup. It sort of bridges the gap maybe between maybe a club championship and inter-county, and that could be a small thing. How maybe they've struggled a bit this year, that they did miss out on the pre-season compared to other counties where football is number one and guys actually know what needs to be done to bridge the gap, where the gap probably between their club championship and their inter-county team probably isn't as wide.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, so we'll move on to the ladies' football from the weekend. I think you were at this one, Thomas. Obviously, again, disappointing enough performance here at losing 2-16 to 2-10 against Westmeath, and it means dropping down a tier down to Division 2 for next year. That was a Division 1 relegation playoff. What are your reflections on this game? I mean, Orla Dwyer came back, scored 5 points. Obviously, Roisin Howard was there as well, and they're involved with the camogie side of things too. But what are your reflections on this game? What went right? What went wrong?
I mean, look, it was a considerable improvement on previous weeks. There's no doubt about that. But it was very much a similar trend at the same time, in that Tipp started relatively well. They were stable. They kept with Westmeath, and then in the second quarter, the game plan just seemed to unravel. Westmeath kicked, I think, 7 points consecutively on the run, uninterrupted, and Tipp effectively faded out of the game. They disappeared. Now, the third quarter, then there was, a major revival. I think we hit something like 2-4 or in excess of that. And Orla Dwyer really was key. She made a really significant impact, and it wasn't just the scoring threat that she poses. It was her ability. I talked about it last week. Her ability to kind of inject a bit of pace into the Tipp setup and move the ball quickly. And Declan Carr talked about that afterwards. Transitioning the ball up the field at pace efficiently, which Tipp have the players to do. There's no doubt about it. And O'Dwyer certainly helped that aspect of their game. Now, what was interesting, Westmeath are a very good team, and you can see they've had a lot of exposure to Division 1 level in the league. They're still not actually a senior side in the championship. They were beaten by Meath last year in the intermediate final. But I think they have every prospect of securing promotion this year. They'll be looking at that intermediate title. But Tipp's game plan, certainly in the latter stage, you could see if Aisling Maloney was fit and well and there, you could see how it could be remarkably effective, because while they were transitioning the ball, they had Howard inside, and she was excellent throughout, but she just wasn't capable of doing it all on her own, and needed someone like the presence of Aisling Maloney to be able to clip over those scores. So I'm not sure, will she be back in time for championship? But I can see kind of the fragments coming together. Tipp have shown it in each game. They've shown kind of glimpses of what they're capable of, and I can, I'm hopeful that it will come together, because I know they're a brilliant bunch of athletes, and really enjoyable to follow. So, it remains to be seen. They have Meath and Cork in their championship group, which is steep enough challenge, but particularly the Meath game they'll be targeting.
Shane, what were your thoughts on it, and where are they coming up short at the moment?
I suppose there has been probably a trend, and you go through the 4 matches, that they've really died off in the fourth quarter. I just wonder, is fitness an issue? Like, compare like there was a sort of the struggle in the second half against Cork, the same against Dublin. I suppose the brilliant third quarter last weekend, like to go 1 point up after being, I think it was 5 down at half time, they were really flying it. But then last 15 minutes, I suppose there were unfortunate 2 goals that went in were sort of off counter attacks, and like a bit of ill luck. I think was it just before, I think the first Westmeath goal, I think the Westmeath goalie pulled off a brilliant save, and if that goal chance had gone in, I think Tipp would have gone 2 up, and you'd like to think they might have seen it out from there. Like, so look, it hasn't been an easy league, and I think they're probably similar to the male football team. If they're missing any of their top end players, there's a big drop off. Like, Samantha Lambert retiring, big loss at the start of the year. Brilliant leader in that team. Then look, Aisling McCarthy hasn't appeared this year. She's not back from Australia yet. She had a knee operation at the end of the AFLW season. There's no guarantee that she will be right for the first round of the championship in about a month's time. So, look, you'd like to think if she's able to go at all, like even at 80 or 90%, she'll be important just for her presence on the field. Because I don't think Aisling Maloney is going to be back. I don't think Emma Morrissey definitely won't be back. So look, we just saw Orla O'Dwyer come back into the team and kick 5 points. It just shows you that when Tipperary can have their best players on the field, they need to have their best players on the field to be competitive. And look, I suppose the next 4 weeks will be important for Declan Carr and his management. They get to go away. I suppose they get to, train properly for the first time, hopefully get a few challenge matches and get to know each other and maybe get to work on some of the weaknesses. But look, maybe fall into Division 2 might be a no bad thing for next year, because like Division 2 is not a bad standard. Like, while it's not up with the Dublins and the Galways and the Corks, but you look, Kerry are down there. Armagh didn't even make the Division 2 semi-final, and they were in the All-Ireland semi-final in senior last year. So look, they're still going to get quality games down there next year, and they're still a very, very young panel overall, that it might be a level where some of those 20, 21, 22, 23-year-old girls will probably get a chance to develop in a competitive arena that's not as steep as what they had to face against the likes of Cork and Dublin this year and Waterford.
And Thomas, just to finish off on the ladies footballers, has Declan Carr's hands been tied behind his back to some degree? You know, Aisling Maloney, Orla O'Dwyer was away, McCarthy as well. I mean, not having his full hand to pick from throughout the league. I mean, Tipperary do need everyone there.
Undoubtedly they were, but I know Declan Carr doesn't deal in excuses, and neither will those Tip players. Neither should any inter-county team. So, you know, of course there are going to be major losses. I mean, Aisling Maloney, you know, from what I've seen of Aisling Maloney, she's probably the best Gaelic footballer I've seen in the flesh, male or female. You know, she's just simply that good. But you know, they have to cope without her, and likewise with Emma Morrissey now, and that will mean adjusting their game plan. And we go back to what we referenced in the hurling earlier on. Versatility and the ability to do that. Now you have to be realistic. I completely accept that. You know, and there's no point adopting a strategy which you know isn't going to work for your side because you don't have the players there. But you know, I can see adjustments that Tipp can make. You know, Orla O'Dwyer, as we said, is remarkably effective. I mean, she could be deployed anywhere in and around the centre of the field. Caitlin Kennedy has been superb from centre back in those couple of games, despite the heavy losses, and her ability to bring the ball forward. I can also see her, you know, maybe you throw her up into the forward line. Now, you know, the counterpoint is that leaves a gulf in centre back, but sometimes, you know, it will require an element of risk, and you know, though Tipper playing Cork, I think it's July 17th. They'll obviously go into that game as underdogs. And that's an opportunity to, you know, I think to kind of almost to let loose and try something radical, particularly if they're without some of their key players. You know, so look, I'm optimistic. I think, as I say, they're a great bunch of athletes. And I think they have it in them to produce big results. I really do think that. So it will be very interesting to see how the championship campaign evolves.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, now we'll move on to the Camogie team and their performance on Sunday against the Cats, losing in fairly heartbreaking circumstances, 3-12 to 19 points. Tipperary were, you know, against the All-Ireland champions, had given an exhibition of a performance as far as I'd be concerned. I'm sure you feel the same way as well. And you know, Caught the Van had given an exhibition in the first half, scored 8 points, 4 of them from play, probably won a few of the frees that she knocked over as well. Orla O'Dwyer, obviously busy weekend, came on at half-time as well, scored a nice point. But we're at the stage now where Tipperary got to a league final last year, didn't get to play that game, get to a semi-final this year. probably should have won that game, only for, Denise Gall and Kate Nolan, 5 minutes from the end sort of normal time, they kind of snatched that. So how do you reflect on that performance from Tipperary and the heartbreak that goes with it?
Really mixed emotions with it. I couldn't credit at the final whistle that they were after losing the game. They played some serious stuff, particularly in the first half, as you were saying. The game plan just went off without a hitch, and the energy on show was unbelievable. They essentially blew Kilkenny off the field in the first half. Some savage interplay. Like, it really continued on from the Offaly performance the previous week. You can see they really have a plan, attacking, running with the ball, the halfbacks moving forward, playing it off the shoulder. And everyone linked up well, and everyone looks like they know what they're doing when they get on the ball, and it's just not off the cuff stuff. To be honest, they were up 5 points at the break. It was probably a bit flattering to Kilkenny. They got a penalty there a couple of minutes before half time, but the response was very good. That brought it back to 3 points, but Tipp had a response every time Kilkenny made any inroads. There were 2 more points before half time. But even the Kilkenny crowd there, I think Brian Dowling, the Kilkenny manager, afterwards referenced he doesn't know how they won the game. They were outplayed for such long stretches. Just those 2 goals really changed the mindset. The Tipp's heads really seemed to drop, and the energy levels were a good bit lower in the third quarter after half time. They seemed to be dropping a bit more ball that they weren't doing. They were still trying to do the right things, but I think the legs were just gone from them. The likes of Karen Kendi was only back. She wasn't really 100% for the match. Roisin Howard played a full football match the day before. She was very good in the first half. She completely went out in the second half. But Caught Van, I'm running out of words to describe her. She's pure class. She didn't get the balls in that she was getting in the first half. She was finding acres of space in the first half. They couldn't handle her. But it was really down to, I think, the heads dropping once those 2 goals went in. Anya Slattery, she'll be very disappointed with the first goal that went in. It was a tame enough shot from Denise Gall. She'd be expecting to save that. And when they got the goal straight after, you just thought, oh no, this is not going to happen after they're hurling so well. Look, overall, I was talking to Bill Mullany after, and he was dejected, really. He was in a bit of shock, I think, that how they lost the game. But you have to be impressed with the way they're playing going into the championship. You just hope it doesn't fester after the result. I was talking last week, maybe they needed a big result against one of the big 3, and they really should have gotten against Kilkenny. But they're hurling really well. I think they're enjoying that type of hurling that's been brought in with the training that's going on. And I think it suits the players they have. And with Orla Dwyer back, they'll be happy enough going into the championship the way they're playing if the results didn't come.
Shane, I just want to read out some of the quotes from the 2 managers after the game. Bill Mullany said, I think last year if we got to play the league final, even if we'd lost it, it would have crowned us and we'd have turned another corner. But our ladies today were absolutely fabulous. They left Everton on the field, and if you lose after leaving Everton on the field, you can't complain. The belief is there. They want to play matches. They'll be devastated for a week, but they're all athletes. They're all GA people. They know the give and take of this, and they'll get back around themselves. Brian Dowling, the Kilkenny manager, said there's huge character in this Kilkenny team, and maybe that belief has come from winning the All-Ireland last year. We know we're not playing as well. We're not hitting big scores in games, and that's something we need to improve on. But another week to go to the league final. We're looking forward to that, and then look forward to the championship. So how much of this do you think is down to belief and the fact that Kilkenny have been there and done it in the past, and they know how to get over the line, and maybe Tipperary, as Mullany has said, maybe need a little bit more experience of that stage?
I think there's definitely something in that. There's no doubt about it. I suppose you could say was there an element of white line fever when they got 5 points up towards the end? But look, I just think the manner of the second goal, I think, was crucial. It was so soft, and for an all-star keeper, it was a mistake, and your heads, when you see a goal going in like that after all your hard work, and suddenly you look at the scoreboard and you're only 2 or 3 points up with 5 minutes to go, and you're in Kilkenny's backyard, and they've just gotten probably a helping hand they probably didn't deserve and didn't need, but you just knew that it's like Kilkenny's hurlers over the years. If you give them an opportunity, they're going to take it, and they did it down the home stretch, and they had, I suppose, in the last after that, the four frees, and Denise Gall scored them all. It just showed you that they knew how to see it out. Whereas Tipperary, probably didn't know how to see out a tight game like that. They hadn't experienced it. And there's no doubt about, I think there's an awful lot of what Bill Mullaney said about even if Tipperary had got to play that league final last year, even if they didn't win it or anything, just the experience of playing in the final. It's like last year's league was sort of played in a group phase, and Tipp won their group, which included Galway, but that Galway team didn't have the Sarsfields contingent because they only played the All-Ireland club final the week before. So it wasn't, while they had beaten Galway in their group, it wasn't Galway's first full strength team. So like we're still awaiting that big result against one of the big four. But look, I think we're as close as we've ever been to them in the last couple of years. I think the performance, like I listened to the first half on local radio, Kilkenny local radio. I was driving to Longford, and like Kilkenny, their commentary team, they couldn't understand how Kilkenny couldn't lay a glove on Tipperary. They said they were so impressive, like their movement and their speed and their skill. Like 5 points, I think Tipp 5 points up at half time. It should have been more apart from the penalty. Look, a Tipp seemed to play a very high octane, high energy game, running game, and look, maybe the fitness levels and then 26-degree heat on Sunday, maybe it took an awful lot out of them. Enda mentioned Roisin Howard and Orla Dwyer playing their second game in 24 hours probably didn't help too. But look, I think once the disappointment dissipates this week, they can take an awful lot of positives from the league. And look, you look at their championship group, they have Wexford, they have Offaly against Limerick. They've got to be targeting 3 wins from there and getting into the quarterfinals as group winners. Like I think after this year, I think this year's league is probably has been as positive as it could have been for Tipperary, despite not reaching a league final.
Would you go along with that, Thomas?
Yeah, I think in general, the appraisal will be positive. And I think, as we said, Tipp have been knocking on the door for the past couple of years. I'd agree with Shane in the sense that I think they are as close now to the top 3 as they have been. And they have matured as a side. And I think they kind of demonstrated that again on Sunday. I had been concerned of an over-reliance on Coit Savan. But I actually think they've dealt with that, and they have an attacking threat there that would rival a lot of inter-county teams. The thing is, can they sustain that high octane running game that Shane mentioned there? But they'll have to sustain it against the likes of Cork, the Cork Kilkennys, the Galways. And I think it's it's definitely within their gift to put it up this year. As I say, this is the year to make that big breakthrough. And they're as close now as they ever were.
Do you agree with that, Enda, that this Tipperary team is on the cusp? I mean, it has to have, you can't keep saying that the team is on the cusp of it. At some stage, you have to make that breakthrough. So do you feel confident about that? Yeah,
definitely. They have the quality, all right. It just takes that one result to give them the confidence that they can do it. The Van was very good the other day, but there was a lot of impressive performances. Their backline is very, very steady, conceding very little. In the first half, they only conceded 1-3, and Kilkenny only had 2 wides. So they're very mean. Mary Ryan, Julianne Burke, Emer Lukeman were very good. Mairead Evison's been very good since she came in last year. Even Emer McGrath up in the forwards, and I've been very impressed with her since she's come in. So they're adding players every year, and I think it's starting to come true on the performances. It just takes that one result. We've seen it over the years with, even in the club hurling and Tipp, Burrs had to get to a couple of finals, Kildangan had to get to a couple of finals. It doesn't happen straight away, and you just have to take the rough with the smooth. And hopefully they've gotten a lot out of the league, and hopefully they take the confidence from that and don't let the Kilkenny loss fester and get into their heads, because they have the ability to do it.
Yeah, Shane, final word to you on it. So are you expecting a big summer out of the Tipperary Camogie team?
I would be, if they can keep injury free the key players, as like Karen Kennedy has mentioned, she's probably carrying a knock the last few weeks, probably wasn't at her best last Sunday. So look, if they can get her back right, I think they have everybody there that they need to have there. I don't think they're missing anybody apart from Claude Quirk, who's out long term. So look, I'd be optimistic. You could nearly at this stage predict that Cork, Galway, Kilkenny and Tipp will probably get to the All-Ireland semi-finals, bar a freak. Maybe I'd say Limerick probably are the one that maybe, and then they're in Tipperary's group in the championship. So maybe they're the one that could upset the apple cart a small bit. But you like to think that Tipp will get to the last 4, and whoever they play, that that they'll be ready, and maybe that bit of hurt and a bit of I would say match smarts that maybe cost them in the closing minutes last Sunday. Maybe they'll have learned from that, and they could be in Croke Park in I think is it the last, or it's the first Sunday in September, the old mail day for the All Ireland final. So hopefully that's the case. Like, I think it's great to be like it's great to have so much inter-county action the last while. We started a bit of a lull, but I'm excited for the summer for all 4 codes. Maybe the men's footballers could be difficult, but I think it'll be an interesting summer ahead. I can't wait for it to come back around again.
Yeah, and you'd be hoping that every weekend wouldn't be as tough as the one just gone by for Tipperary. So that wraps it up for episode 7 of TippCast. My thanks to Thomas Conway, Enda Treacy, Shane Brophy, and from myself, Shane Stapleton. So don't forget to pick up the paper and get involved with the Nenagh Guardian and all the different social channels. Thanks very much, lads. Welcome to TippCast by the Nenagh Guardian.